This short lesson is going to cover the basics of HTML syntax. Basically, this is how you will need to write your code in order for it to display correctly in your browser window and in other people's browser windows. We have 4 rules for you to follow, and we will be covering each of these in depth as we go through here. So the first one is you need to finish what you start. You need a beginning and ending tag for each piece of content that you're going to include on your web page. You need to build code like Russian dolls. Just like Russian dolls are nested inside one another, tag sets also need to be nested inside each other. Otherwise, it will be rendered invalid. Also, HTML tags should always be in lowercase. The actual code part of the tag should be in lowercase. The content for what goes inside of those tags, that can be whatever you want, because that's how you want it to display. And then any extra information, such as ID names or class names, need to be entered in the first tag, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So first of all, this idea of finishing what you start. Each HTML tag is going to have an opening tag, as we see here with the P tag. That's the paragraph tag for rendering text in a browser window. And then a closing tag, which always starts first with the caret or the less than sign, and then a slash, and then the name of the tag that you're closing. So in this case, we open with a P, and then we're going to put a closing tag to finish that paragraph. So here's an example. So we might have on our page one sentence that says, "Hello, web designers." In this case, we open with a P tag, and at the end we close with a slash P tag. Can anybody look at this and guess why it doesn't work? I think you might notice from the top example that this one, this third example here, doesn't work because there is no closing tag. It's 2 opening tags, so you always need to have that opening and closing tag. This one also doesn't work, basically because we don't have any kind of a tag closing it. And the way HTML works is if you do not close a tag and you have a bunch of other content below, maybe you have headings, maybe you have bulleted lists. If that P tag does not get closed, everything will be rendered as a paragraph until that paragraph tag is closed. So we need to try to avoid leaving tags unclosed. So here again is the correct way. So you always have that opening and closing tag. Now, when you put tags in, when you put your content in code, you're going to have a lot of different pieces of content, and some of it will be nested inside one another. You'll want some text in one block. You might want a picture on a left-hand column instead of a right-hand column, and those things need to be nested inside code. And this is a lot like the idea of Russian dolls. Or another example I've heard of is the way we pack groceries at the grocery store. In this case, an egg goes inside of an egg carton, and then the egg carton is then placed in your grocery bag. And that works because everything is contained where it's supposed to be. Now if we switch that around and we put in the egg first, and then we put the egg carton on top of it, we got a mess on our hands, and we have a smashed egg. The same thing is going to work with HTML. If we don't nest things correctly, they're not going to work properly. So let's look at this particular example and see if you can find the nesting error. Okay, so what we have here is the first example works fine because the EM tag, or emphasis tag, which basically just makes text go italic, is nested inside the heading 1 tag. The next example here, where the strong tag, which is basically saying make this text bold, we might have a problem here. And I think you may have noticed already that that final closing strong tag needs to be nested inside the P. So there is that clear differentiation between things that go inside one another. Another example of this is when we start working with divs. And div tags are basically just blocks that help us organize our content on a web page. In this case, they all have different IDs to help us understand which one is which. If we look at this first one, the div ID called page container, That div is not closed until the final that final tag at the end there. So it's not nested within anything. Now, if we go up to the div called header, that one is nested inside something. Now, it's only nested inside the page container, as we see that it closes right after that. Now, if we look at the body and the column tags, the body div is nested inside the page container, but the column tag is nested inside the body, and you can see how that works because the column closes first before the div called body closes. The other rule is that we need to keep tags lowercase. HTML is a language read by your browser, so like with any language, if we're using the wrong words or we're using the wrong syntax, somebody that speaks that language isn't going to understand what we're talking about. So in other words, the P tag as a lowercase p is not the same as P or the word P spelled out. Just as a best practice, make sure any tag you put in is lowercase. And anytime you title, maybe like you saw those IDs, make those IDs lowercase too, and that way you can guarantee you're never working in uppercase in your HTML code. Our final rule that we have when we're working with HTML is that any kind of extra information that we want to add to a tag needs to go in that first tag. So let's return to our nesting example to see how this works. Now, if we look at the opening tag for the div called page container, we see that we didn't want this div just to be a plain old div tag. We wanted to give it a name so we could tell it apart from the other ones. Now, the place to do that is in the first tag, because as we see in the closing tag, we're not actually putting the ID also in the closing tag. We only need that in the first tag. We see the same thing here with the div called header. When we close that tag, again, we don't put that ID information in. That extra information always goes in that first tag. The reason for this is that the browser reads HTML straight down the page. It doesn't want to find out extra information after it's already presented the text to the browser. Because this can be a problem. What happens is if it reads a P tag and then there's 3 pages of paragraph text, and then it finds out at the end that it wanted that paragraph text to be read, it's not going to be able to make that change. If we take a look at this New Yorker cartoon, we can see what happens when we leave information out until it's too late. So I want to just recap the rules that we need to follow when we're doing our HTML coding. First, you want to finish what you start. You need a beginning and an ending tag to everything. You need to build code like Russian dolls or eggs in grocery bags. You need to set your tag sets inside each other. HTML tags are always in lowercase. Just get in that practice now and you'll never have a problem. Just make everything lowercase. And then any information such as the ID, as we saw in this previous example, or class names need to be entered in the first tag.